Hello crafty friends, a very warm welcome to you today. In this video I'm going to be using some of my white scraps to create a mixed media background that I can then cut up and use on the front of my cards. So I rummaged through my white paper scraps and found some nice chunky bits. I flipped them over and then stuck them together with some washi tape so that I could work on them as if they were one piece of paper. I just find this a really easy way of colouring paper scraps. I really wanted to do some smushing, and I like quite often to heat emboss before I smush, because when you do that the ink pools around the heat embossing in appealing ways. So I inked up a sheet music rubber stamp with embossing ink and stamped it in a few places, and then I found a rubber stamp that had a bit of scripty writing on and a flower, so I stamped that in the gaps between the sheet music. I then drizzled on some gold embossing powder. I didn't bother treating my card with anti-static powder because I was going for a fairly grungy look. So it didn't matter if powder stuck in places where I didn't intend it to. So once I'd covered the whole thing in powder, I heated it with my heat tool, and then I let it cool and set and smushed on some Victorian Velvet Distress Oxide, which gives me very vintagey vibes. For my smushing, all I did was put my ink on my mat, squirt it with a bit of water to turn it into a nice runny paint. Then I picked it up with my smusher and smushed it all over my heat embossing. If you want to know how to make a smusher, there is a video linked down below in this video's description. Before that had a chance to dry completely, I smushed some vintage photo on. Not quite as much as I did with the Victorian Velvet, because I wanted the Victorian Velvet to really show through. But once I'd finished with the vintage photo, I dried it with my hairdryer. And then I took a microfiber cloth and just buffed over the heat embossing to wipe off any ink. I wanted the heat embossing to really shine. I did want to bring in a bit more texture though, visual texture, so I got I think this is a kind of fleur-de-lis pattern. Not 100% sure that that's what it's called, but it's a stencil with a vintagey pattern in, and I just added ink through the stencil with vintage photo again, creating little patches of visual texture and interest. As a finishing touch to my background, I spattered on some very dark copper metallic paint, and that gave me some lovely extra shimmer and shine. I did feel that everything needed a little bit of lightening a bit, so once the copper spattering was dry, I spattered on some white metallic as well. And once everything was absolutely dry, I flipped my paper over and removed the washi tape because I was ready to do some die cutting. So for my die cutting, I chose fishtail banners, and I cut out a small, medium and large. And then I added 1 to each of 6 card blanks that I'd made using hammered textured white cardstock for a bit of a luxurious feel. With the largest banners, I put 1 in the top left-hand corner and then 1 in the top right-hand corner, so they were mirror images. And I did the same thing with the middle-sized banners. But when I put the small banners in the corners, I felt they got a little bit lost, so I decided to pop them in the middle. So they're sitting about 1/3 of the way down from the top, but in the middle of the card, and I think they filled up the space visually really well, but there was still plenty of white space around them. Next, I die cut 3 sizes of stitched white circles, a small, medium and a large. I added the large ones to the large banners, popped them bang in the middle. Same with the medium-sized circles and the medium-sized banners. But with the small circles on the small banners, I put the circles off to the side just because they covered up too much of the background, and also I felt they would look nice offset like that. For these small banner cards, I took some scraps of the mixed media background that I created and punched out some hearts and placed a heart on each of the small circles. And then I took some new to me dies. I got these from the Crafty Charity Shop. I think they might be X-cut because they're black. And they are silhouettes of female heads. Now there's a word to describe these, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember what they're called, but you might be able to remember. I'll Google it when I've finished. Anyway, I die cut these from hammered textured white cardstock to give them some texture, and then I pressed them into some embossing ink and put them in my gold embossing powder and covered them in the embossing powder. I then heated these with my heat tool to melt the embossing powder, and once those had cooled and set, I repeated the process. I pushed them down into the ink, covered them in embossing powder and melted them with my heat tool, and I really like the way these turned out. They've got a kind of vintagey, grungy gold textured look to them. Once they were cooled and set, I used some high-tack glue to stick them on my cards. I put them on the circles that I'd added to my banners, and I made sure the faces were facing the empty space on the card. They were looking out from the banner across an expanse of card. When it came to adding sentiments, I used my grungy label stamps and I heat embossed the sentiments in gold and trimmed them out with my scissors. I used those for the large banner cards and the medium banner cards, but for the small banner cards with the heart on, I simply stamped some all capital letter sentiments in black on some card and then die cut them out with a stitched rectangle. I think the quite large grungy label stamps would have overwhelmed the smaller banner. As a finishing touch, I dotted around some pale gold Nouveau drops, and that was these cards finished. I do hope you like the cards, and I hope the video has given you some ideas of things you can do with your own white paper scraps. If it has, do let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you back here very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.